Hey guys, I'm George Gonzalez. I'm obsessed with making games, and today we're going to talk about hackers and their set of mind and give you an idea of what you can do for your game. There's certain things that you need to know before you even publish your game, and there's things that you can do after, depending on how you set things up. And so we're going to talk a lot about hacking, and I have 5 things that we're going to talk about in here to help you understand hacking, or at least like what hackers are doing or could do to your game. And then even this is not like an extensive list of things they can do, but it's a generic idea to help you understand. And then with all these in mind, at the end we're going to talk about, okay, how to prevent them or how to combat them. And it's a lot easier to talk about these after we go over all these points, all these 5 points, because there's no point in talking about one without context of the others. And you'll see this at the end. So this is going to be very helpful if you, for all developers, whether you've launched a title before and you've had problems and you're looking to figure out how to prevent hacking, or at least get a hold of it, control it, or if you have a current live game and you're trying to figure out how to improve it. And this is specifically even more important for those that are learning the ropes and trying to figure things out for the future. So let's start with the first one, obfuscation. There are plugins on Unity that will help you obscurate your code. So this, what it does, it basically changes the public variables and stuff so that you can't read them. So even someone that hacks your game, they can't read what's going on. And so it's a layer of protection. The problem with this is that there's already a lot of plugins that hackers use to just revert that. I'm not sure how they work, on how it goes. I just know that it doesn't stop it. Does it cause more headache? I'm not sure, because I think if you already know how to do it, you have the plugin, then it's fine. But oftentimes developers take a lot of time trying to figure out the plugin and figure out how to add it, and so I tend to not use it. That's just me. But you can use it. It's okay. But I've had games that are like super hacked, and they use this obfuscation, and I never use it, and I'm fine. Okay, so we'll talk about it more later, but for the most part, this is just something that comes up at first, and this is one of the first walls that you do for hackers. And honestly, in my experience, especially if you're on Steam, it's super easy to bypass it in PC, and then for Meta on VR, the Quest, it's now a thing that it's easy to pass. Okay, the next, number 2, public functions, and this is something I want to show you. Oftentimes you will have, as you make the code, you are not focused on hacking. You think, you could do that after, or you say, well, I have all these functions, but I'm just gonna obfuscate the code, and so players won't be able to detect it, right? But the problem is that once they find out, these are functions they can use publicly. And so what I've done is just what I'm hoping will change in your developing career from now on is that you'll think of it as any public function as you're coding. Just assume the hackers will have access to it. So just think, as I'm creating this code for save player data, and I'm like typing it out, and I'm doing it, it's like, the way I think about it is like, if a hacker started abusing this, like let's say they call it 20 times a day or 100 times in a second, is this going to cause problems for the game? Like, can they abuse the save player spell data? No, they can't. So they can call it as many times as they want. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll come in here and modify these, right? To call, because the other thing that they do is they're able to see all these things. So they're able to see, okay, I have a spell data JSON, and I'm uploading it to PlayFab. So what I can do is I can modify this JSON, this string, and create my own function in here that does the same thing. And so then I can have my own spells. The only problem is for that my spells have a very specific data structure that they can use, like it has the nodes. They can put in here like 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, right? Like a comma 10. And then they can have like all the spells upgraded. But in the long run, they're not gonna do that. Typically, hackers will try to, what they do is control the player and try to spam things. When I'm coding, the thing that I do is I think about that. I think of it, if the player were able to access this function, could they do any harm? And sometimes the answer is yes, but it's just going to ruin their experience. And so sometimes, especially if you have a single player game, oftentimes hacking just ruins their experience. Most of the times they pirate the game entirely so that they can then play it for free. And so that's why oftentimes I prefer to just do a free-to-play game, because if my game is $50 and it's a hit and everyone loves it, or even if people don't love it, but people want to try to play it, they'll just pirate the game. And so there's no point in trying to sell copies, because then you're just fighting for copies. And I've seen on Steam, even AAA games, people pirate games all the time. So there's no amount of money that will stop you other than lawsuits and trying to find these guys. And there's ways you can find them if you want to. But for right now, just let you know, it's not worth it. But when I code, I think about, okay, the hacker is able to see all this. Am I okay with that? If you're not okay with that, you can separate things. So if you have a private function in here that says finalize save data, Oh, whoops, and void. I can, for the most part, do this, and I do it sometimes. And then I can say finalize save data. And now the hackers won't be able, because this is not on there available to them. They just save this. Sometimes I'm not like a pro at this, so I'm not sure how much they can see, how much they can. But I'm pretty sure most of like the intermediate or low level hackers, they'll see the code, and basically they can see the public functions, because that is easy, low hanging fruit, right? So they can see that. So it's just one step removed from that. But it's not a big deal. So typically, information that I don't care, like loading and saving data, is not a big deal. Most of the times where you have to watch out, and we'll go over this later, is currency, your game currency, or things that you care about, cosmetics, things you sell for money that it hurts your income for your game. Let's see. So the next topic we have is player prefs. And again, if you have a single player game, most of the time developers will use player prefs to save data. And even if you like again the I can't even say obfuscation with a player pref, you say, oh, I'm gonna like create a key, and then they like change it. So even if they have the file, they don't know what it is. Like they can decrypt it. Like even if you encrypt it and you think you're like all this smart stuff, it's not gonna work. They're gonna figure out how to do it. So I would, even if I was making a single player game, I would make a back end. Like if I had experience with PlayFab, like I do, I just use PlayFab for. I know a lot of developers use also Firebase from like creating apps, because it's super easy and fast. Firebase. I don't know which one's worse or better, but I've seen Firebase accounts hacked left and right because they're just text files uploaded on the cloud. And so it depends on how you handle data and if they are able to access your database on Firebase. And it just depends on how, again, it's not so much where you put things, it's just the fact that how you handle the communication with your backend. And again, we'll talk more about specifics, but I want you to understand these things, because if you have a backend where you store data, it's a lot safer than if it's on the player, because then they have access to it. If it's on the headset, on the PC, that's why a lot of the Steam games are easily hackable, because they save the game and the files in a folder on your computer. The next one is memory manipulation. This one's one of the, I think, the hardest to combat, at least what at first glance. And I'll give you at the end, like we'll talk about all these and how to prevent this or how to combat these. But memory manipulation is basically like they see the memory, and I'm not like exactly know how it happens. I just know it can happen. And the main idea is that you have bytes in like the computer, you know, like zeros and ones and whatnot, where you could say the matrix. But basically they have tools that allow them to see how memory is manipulated based on variables. So like when you add star coins, which bits or bytes in your game are changed because of that. And so then they can like try to manipulate the numbers and the bytes and see where it would trigger that, and it would give you a certain amount. And so sometimes when you change, for example, the star, like a coin or in-game currency value, it will change this memory, the specific place in memory. And so then they either try to change it themselves or make it so that it overflows and it creates a loop, and it does certain things that the game wasn't expecting. And so it just breaks things, or it tries to adapt, like they do certain manipulations. It's just memory manipulation so that they can access to different values. You can look up an example with Pokemon. I remember for the Game Boy Red, there was a way to manipulate fighting a Mew, like the last Pokemon. It wasn't even like in the game, but because you had to do a certain amount of things to trigger, and that wasn't so much. It was memory manipulation, but it was a bug that they found that if you encounter a certain Pokemon in a certain place and then you backed out and then you came back, it would create a bit change, and that change would trigger and it would give you the last Pokemon in the Pokedex, which is a Mew, and it will allow you to catch that Mew. And then you could do that same thing to catch random Pokemons, because it would change a certain value in memory and give you a different Pokemon. And so then you would like do these hacks to constantly battle with different Pokemons. But there was a sequence of events that you had to do. But hackers will do similar things, but they will actually manipulate the game. They will change. So they're really hacking. Whereas this one was kind of like a bug that you could find but it was the same principle, right? That you could manipulate memory, and because the games are made with bits, like zeros and ones, you can figure out what the computer's doing and change that. And so because of that, it's really hard, because you can create obfuscation. You can have a bunch of like checks and walls. It doesn't matter, because no matter what you do, the game runs on a computer or on a chip, and that chip has memory allocation and different things that it does and it needs to do to run. And so this is hacking at the core level of the game. So hopefully that helps you understand kind of like the tools that hackers have. And now we're going to talk about the last thing, which is okay. So now, once you find the hacker, sometimes you want to ban them, and because you notice that like they have a billion of a certain in-game currency and they're not supposed to, or you can easily see that, especially if you have a back end, because you can see them manipulating the things and saving information that's not allowed. So you can manually ban them or see them, but then they'll have a VPN. They'll use a VPN to jump. Sometimes like they'll create a new account because they can hack. They're okay with leaving the old account because they can have a new account with all the money they want, right? And so a lot of times these are components that hackers have, and they have all these tools, and oftentimes you're fighting and you're like, man, this feels like a losing battle because they have all these tools, they already have all the plugins. How do I stop them? And the idea is not so much to stop them as it is to figure out the best way to prevent the game from not being successful. So there's different things that can happen, right? They can get your files, they can try to sell your game online, which is the craziest one. But if you have good back-end services and stuff, you can probably do like a version control so that it doesn't allow specific versions to connect to your backend or your multiplayer services. So that's one way to avoid other people using your own backend to play the game. Now they might decide to use their own backend and use your game and sell it. At that point, it is something that you have to figure out with the lawsuit. There are many IPs that get hacked or even duplicated and stolen in China, and so like China always has. There's nothing sometimes you can't do. But for now, let me give you some ideas on how to fix all these things. So obfuscation, I just don't bother with because I have other methods. Okay, I already know that if I set the wall up, it's just one more thing that I have to add to my project. So I just prefer not to. But if you want to, because you feel that safe and you seen it help you, that's fine. Public functions and whatnot, I'm going to show you. So the main thing with all these is you got to think, what is it that I'm concerned about? If you are selling copies as a game, the main thing is having a backend and checking against that backend. And again, I made a video last week about using Assure functions to connect to your backend, to PlayFab specifically. If you have a third party that you can use as a small kind of like a server to validate users or even to check what version of the game it is and allow or don't allow players to connect, that is something that can help you, right? Because then if someone is on a hacked account, pirated version, they might say, oh, I don't want to connect to the backend. And they just don't. And then they lose the experience, or they might not be able to connect to the network, whatever. Maybe they have mods, but that will help you at least not lose money in the backend, and they might lose out on the experience altogether. The other thing, let's say we have a multiplayer game. We have the public functions. I have in-game currency. What do I do with hackers? And this is something that I like to do a lot. And so in Unity, in here, I have this shop display, right? And this is where players buy stuff. And so what if the hacker were able to just get whatever they wanted, right? Well, we have cosmetics. The main thing is that they would have to know the specific name, which they could try to figure out. But then there's a lot of work that has to do with like cosmetics and setting it up, especially on network. And so hackers sometimes are lazy. And so what they will want is they'll hack the currency, the in-game currency. So instead of trying to hack the cosmetic shop, they'll try to say, well, I'll grant myself coins. So let's say they use the memory manipulation to allocate memory and just give it infinite coins. Okay, let's say in the game, they give themselves 9,900 of the currency. How does my game use currency? Well, in here, we have a buy item, okay? And we have an event channel. And the event channel doesn't matter. I could have a public function because it is a public function that goes in here and it says purchase item, okay? So this could be accessed by the player, right? And the hacker. And even if these are no, you'll just say, but we're making a purchase. What is this, the cost? Let's say the player decides, I want this to cost 0 and I want to buy this item. Technically, they could write whatever item. So even as long as they know it exists, right? And they can give the cost. The problem with PlayFab is that PlayFab will do the purchase. This purchase API is on their server. And if the cost doesn't match what's on PlayFab, it's not going to let you do it. Also, you notice that in here, there's nothing that checks the currency. So we're using MR. This is Mystic Rubies in my game. The hackers will have infinite currency in their text, like in their game. But the thing is, PlayFab has the data of how much inventory they have in the backend. So if you were to do your own game and you'd set up your own store, you'd probably create a variable and you update the variable and you grant currency. And the problem with that is that you are manipulating the currency from the game, and the hackers will use that to update their currency. In here, there's nothing. So when they purchase currency, it's a similar flow. The transaction all happens on PlayFab. It's the same with Steam. I have a transaction. And then, so how do they get coins? And so even, let's say they have infinite amount of coins and they try to purchase this. Even if they hack it and they say the cost, if the cost is 0, it's not going to purchase it. Okay, so first of all, if the cost is zero, it doesn't persist. So let's say they leave the cost as is, but they have hacked a billion currencies. Well, it doesn't matter because the transaction happens on PlayFab. So PlayFab then checks the currency in the back end and it sees that they don't have enough. And so it just won't purchase it. So they can manipulate whatever they want. It's not going to work. And so, for example, if there's any hackers, you can come and try to hack my game. I don't care. Like I've invited hackers to playtest my game, Magic Hunters, to say, and I've had a hacker be like, "Here, I can see all your currency. I can see all your stats." It's like I don't care what stats you have. Like manipulate them, right? Like change them. It doesn't matter. Like I don't care what you can see or can't see. Like my concern is, can you give yourself infinite rubies or infinite mystic rubies and use them, right? Because you can pretend you have a billion of something and you can take a screenshot. Whoop-de-doo, you hack the game, but it doesn't do anything for them because they can't purchase with that fake money. That makes sense. And so I welcome the hackers to try to figure out how to hack my game. The other thing. And it's a free to play game, so pirated version doesn't mean anything. I don't care. Like, and I'm gonna make updates with cool cosmetics, and so even if they pirate my game and they try to sell it, it doesn't matter because they don't have the latest, and so they'll have to update things as they go. And I have the backend. I can set up version control. So the other thing that I can do is on login. Like I said, I show you how I have an Azure function that's they don't have access to, and if they don't go through that, they can't log into my backend. So the only way to do this is to log into their own backend. But the problem is that my backend has all my inventory, and so you can't really play the game unless you access my backend. So that's the cool thing of having inventory on PlayFab and the currency on PlayFab, because like they need to access it. And so the moment I cut off the client creation from my end, which is what I did on the previous video, is they can't make new accounts. They have to create new accounts on their own. And if you want to watch my videos. And if they want to get currency, they have to go through PlayFab. And so there's no, like, they're dependent on my backend, if that makes sense. And so even if they pirate it, they move it, and they change to their own PlayFab thing, they have to create all these assets. And so they have to do more work, which is not worth it. The other, so let me say, so, okay, how do I add currency into their account? How does that work? Okay, so I have in-app purchase. I will show you. PlayFab in-app purchase. And I have one for Steam, and I have one for Meta. But the idea in here is pretty straightforward. There's nothing crazy. Is that we have a SKU, and we purchase the item, and the price is zero. But so they can say, hey, we want to purchase this item. So they have the SKU, and they can do this. But the problem is these calls are private. They can't see these usually. They can watch this video, and they can go and say, okay, we're going to create this API to purchase this specific item. But they don't know what the SKU is. Like, what's the SKU? The platform SKU. Like, and let's say they do get the SKU and they purchase it. They can hack and they can have. What I can do is I can create a backend script called Cloud Script to check the currency being granted. And see what's being added. And so if the account keeps getting bigger and bigger and it exceeds a certain amount, I can automatically ban them. I made videos again on how to ban people using Cloud Scripts. And if you want access to all this code and help, I have endgame devs to help you avoid these things. But I have all this stuff on the back end. And the granting on Steam is even more secure because Steam purchase goes through a whole mechanism with Steam. And so nothing in here gets added like that. So it's totally different, actually, than this. The price is not set to zero. It's set to the real money value. And so it's the same with this. Is they could do it, but I can still, in the back end, see if there's malicious see edge cases. So this is one time where, yes, they could kind of hack it, but they would have to have a lot of information to hack it, right? And so again, it's a lot more work, and they can't do the manipulation, the memory manipulation. The moment they do that, it changes, and so they can't keep track of that. So the best play for hackers is to know the SKU of what I'm trying to buy or what they're trying to buy, and then creating these API calls to PlayFab. But the problem is, in order to call those functions, they have to log in. And so what they would have to do is create functions. So there's a lot more work that has to be done in order to create this. But once they create it, they can have a modded version that can help them log in and just keep calling this buy option from PlayFab. But I can catch them because I can either, one, manually see that, or create an automation process that automatically bans them. And you might say, well, doesn't that ban anyone that's actually spending money? Well, it depends. I'm not going to tell them my secret. So that's one secret that I'm not going to share because I don't want to tell the hackers how I catch them, but I've done it for sale, and I caught a lot of hackers and through the auto ban, and I know that I can do that for my game. I'm super confident in my in-game currency and what I can do. So my next thing is, if you want to know more about these tactics and how I implement them, or like you need one-on-one help, I have my Endgame Devs community where I do weekly calls and we talk about game design concepts. And we do specifically, we can do stuff like this, like the hacking, and help you figure out the best plan for your game, because every game is different in the monetization and what you care about and how to prevent things from happening. That is the main thing, is understanding all these things that can go wrong with your game and how to prevent them. The last thing is the auto ban. I did a video on that. And so the two things that I didn't talk much about is how to do the server to server authentication. I did a video on that. And then if the other thing is banning players through Cloud Script. Again, I have the video and I have the script in there, so you can copy paste that and figure out when you want to ban people. But those two things in general, like banning players, will help you keep it a healthy community, and it'll scare the hackers because they just want things for free. And they want to ruin your game. The last thing that I want to talk about, there's, for example, in VR specifically, this is a caveat. One of the reasons I like the Gorilla Tag movement is because it's hard to hack. If you're on PC, hacking Gorilla Tag movement is really hard to move around. And I've seen hackers hacking my game because I could see how the rig is behaving, and I can see someone's manipulating it in the editor because I've done it before. I've seen it. And so I know what it looks like when someone's trying to hack the game from a PC. And so they'll usually spam public calls, like again, RPCs, to shoot people and stuff. And so there's a higher level of not just currency, but also hacking to multiplayer games to gain an advantage over other people, and auto aim, auto hit. And there's ways to combat that, right? Again, when you're coding and you're saying, okay, like if players could see this, could they abuse it? And so, for example, one thing that you could do, instead of having the player that's shooting be the one in charge of, did I hit you, yes or no, you can have the other player be in charge if I got hit or not, and then tell that. So that way hackers can't immediately hit people and just interrupt or sometimes they'll spam a call. The other way I do this is by having different scenes load. And so in order to get from one scene to the other, you might have to move, you might have to click a button, and that makes it harder for hackers to create these calls. Because if you land the hacker in the middle of the game right away, then they'll be able to create all these plugins and these mods to auto fire, auto aim, and make it horrible for the other players. And so it's a horrible experience. In my game, I have a co-op experience. So it doesn't really, there's no PvP. But if you have PvP, that's something that you are probably wanting to know more about. And so that's why I'm saying, if you want specific help for your game, that's why I have Endgame Devs. It's a community where I help people with their specific problems, because that is the best way I can grant my knowledge to those that want it for their specific games. Here on YouTube, I'll share general knowledge, general principles that you can apply to your game. But if you need specific help to apply these principles to your games and your needs, then join Endgame Devs. We'll see you on the next video.